right, hello and welcome to the 2021 Cal-ISBOA Annual Conference. You are in breakout session Campus Dining New Service Model. I'm Andrea Marcus, the Membership Engagement Manager at Cal-ISBOA, and I'm so pleased to introduce our presenters today. We have Paco and Tina Rodriguez, the founders of Stage Dining. And with that, I will hand it over to Paco and Tina.
Thank you, Andrea. So what you're looking at on the screen here is essentially the cover slide for the presentation that we did for Cal-ISBOA back in June. And as we were getting ready for this presentation, it struck us that, oh my gosh, that is so inappropriate. Look at the seats, they're right, all people are on top of each other. That is clearly the pre-COVID world. Because this is what a boarding school dining hall is more likely to look like today, with a capacity cut in half. In fact, this particular school, when I visited about a month before, they had added back the fourth chair and they were down to 3 chairs, and they doubled the number of lunch periods to try to keep everybody separated. But for most kids, I think the lunch experience these days might actually look something more like this. A gymnasium, folding tables, makeshift plexiglass dividers put together by the school's maintenance department, signage everywhere.
So what we're going to take you through here is a trip down memory lane to show what we had thought back in June would happen, and then showing you what actually did happen as the COVID world wore on. And the theme that recurs throughout this presentation is, as we move forward, is the importance of needing to challenge every assumption. Things don't need to be the way they've assumed they were pre-COVID, because everything can be challenged and take on new meaning in a good way. So with that, let's take a look at June.
So in the June presentation, we used a framework that looked at the 3 options that schools were going to be facing when it was time to reopen. One was continue distance learning, nobody on campus. Second option, come back, have part of the population come back. And the final option was come back with everybody on campus. And depending on which one of those 3 routes a school decided to take, the food service options would be different. If you continue distance learning, you could obviously have no food service. Not good for our business, but a very real possibility. But the public schools at the time, back in the spring, were doing meals to go for the benefit of all the kids who relied on the school nutrition programs. And some of our private schools did that as well. For the schools that came back at half capacity in some form or another, we figured that there would be a few different choices. 1, kids could brown bag it. You could just shut down the food service. 2, we could be delivering meals to the classrooms, because that was obviously the model that the consultants were pushing for. And 3, if at less than 100% capacity, even with social distancing, it was theoretically possible still to get the kids through the cafeteria. That's what we meant by modify service. Now, on the other hand, when the day came, or if the decision was made for the school to go to full capacity, well, we probably never could get all the kids through that cafeteria in a timely way, in a safe way. So undoubtedly, we would have to do what we call satellite locations. In other words, we'd have to clone the servery around campus so that people could pick up their lunch in different places, since the old model of sending everybody through wouldn't work. So what we're going to do now is look at those 3 primary models: delivering meals, sending people through the cafeteria with all of the changes that was going to imply, or cloning the cafeteria and having it at different places around campus.
But before we move on to show how this started to evolve, we say we missed a few of the options. Under the very first box of continuing distance learning, we didn't imagine something that ended up happening at a lot of schools, which is the schools brought the faculty back on campus to teach, and we continue to serve food to the faculty. So that was one difference. And 2, in boarding school environments, where their faculty living on campus, we were asked to provide food, as in ingredients and recipes, so that those faculty members could cook at home for themselves and their families. So even just the options ended up being more than we had considered. So how did the world evolve? Well, throughout, so taking a look at the slide that's on the left, this is maybe hard for you to read, but the months are arrayed across the bottom. In April, May, June, July, we continue to feed, but only about 20% of all of our schools, even though it says it's camps, however, boarding schools. So there were always some operations. And you can really see the numbers ratchet up in August, which is the green bar, and September, which is the red bar. So literally by September, or I'd say October, 93% of the schools that we served had reopened. And by reopen, we selfishly mean serving food. So they may have all been open and doing virtual learning, but these are the schools that were serving food, as in most of them. The picture on the right, the slide on the right, the pie chart, is a depiction of the method of service, the how we were serving. And this is again as of about October, because it didn't start this way. The first bar to point out is the green one, which is 12% of the population. That is classroom delivery. And at the, back in the spring and early summer, this is pretty much the only option that was being discussed by consultants who were telling everybody that's the only safe way to do things. Put food in boxes, deliver it to each student who literally does not stand up from their seat in their classroom is the safest method. So by October, only 12% were feeding that way.
Exclusively though.
Yes, exclusively that way. 7% were using that satellite model that Paco had just referred to. This blue bar, the biggest one, almost 50%, were serving through the servery. And 30%, the gold, is represents those who have a combination of methods, not just one, but multiple methods being used on campus. Again, not something we really anticipated at the time. The important thing, though, is 50% of the people were bringing students back through the servery.
So this was obviously, though, a moving target. And as we dealt with schools, we realized there was a transition going on. The places which had classroom delivery, by and large, had the lowest level of student satisfaction. And we'll go into the details for why. And so there was a migration happening. If you started with classroom delivery, you tended to migrate towards coming up with those satellite serving lines. And then the places with satellite serving lines, that was better, but it wasn't as good as the school cafeteria. Because the kitchen's not there, the food's not as hot. It's just doesn't have the equipment. So the migration tended to be over the course of the year from delivery to satellite, and from satellite to the traditional servery.
And it moved quickly.
In some cases,
really
yeah.
Quickly.
So let's go back to June. When in June, this is the slide that we put up to describe what classroom delivery was going to be all about. We said the first thing was, if you were going to deliver, you needed to have some kind of an ordering system. And at the time, people were using Google Forms, even though there were some other commercially available products. Well, Google Forms made it through the year. People who used it tended to stay with it. It worked. You couldn't argue with the price. We came up with ordering software of our own, but most of our clients stayed with Google Forms. We predicted that packaging everything up for delivery was going to cost a lot of money in terms of packaging, and that it was going to lead to some really bad PR for all the piles of trash that were created. And then just having to package all of that stuff is very labor intensive. Frankly, this scared me to death back in June, because we were not set up to be a delivery company delivering to so many places. And so in order to do it, something that labor intensive, it was going to have to be, the program was going to have to be trimmed down. The variety was going to have to be cut back. And there's always the danger when you cut back variety that you don't have enough variety for the population that you're trying to keep happy every day.
Do you want to see what the production process looks like for classroom delivery? The photo on the right is a very large display, and it's only one of many of a series of displays of boxes into which food is getting placed. Now, remember, students are ordering them. There's more than one choice. So this is obviously all of one type. There's another set of tables to the right, which is another huge display, similarly of a different type of selection. And the line attendants are going through and filling every box. Every box has an identical quantity of food, number of items, etc. And the following picture is going to show you what a kind of frustrated food service person looks like when they're trying to go through this process. It was tremendously complex, tremendously difficult for them to do. And guess what? Not only is it hard to produce on the dining service side, but believe it or not, it's even more work for teachers, because the process went like this. We put things together. It would be placed in large containers, moved across campus, left in front of that teacher's room, because the food service workers were not supposed to be crossing paths with the students. The teacher would retrieve the box from outside the classroom and then distribute it to all the students. It was a lot of extra work for the teachers. And the kids weren't really happy. It wasn't necessarily what they wanted to have that day. It wasn't, to their liking. There was both food waste and inadequacy. And you could say, now, how do you do both?
Yeah, how do you lose both ways?
Yeah, how can you do both at the same time? It's like, well, if somebody's really hungry and somebody's not, the box contains the same quantity of food. You could have a football player and then a bookworm right next to them, same amount of food, because that's what just a standard industrial process provides you. So nobody was happy. And then something that really was new to us, we learned that certain items just don't do well when they are delivered. The picture to the right is actually, I think, just a gorgeous photo, very appetizing food. This is a hard shell taco with the fixings and black beans, refried beans, some strawberries, some salsa. I mean, it is beautiful and one of students' favorite meals, that we serve. But when you put this in a container, and it's hot, and you close the dome, and then you put it in the racks, and then it sits and waits, then it gets transported across campus, and it gets left in front of the teacher's room, and then it waits, and then it gets served to the students a long time later. It's not a crispy taco anymore. It's a mess. It's a soggy mess, and it's horrible, and nobody's happy. So we were faced with these menus that we loved, popular foods the kids really loved, that really just did not hit the mark. So we had to rethink the types of foods that we could serve. The one winning point, those the youngest grades. This system is great for the lower school kids. They actually enjoy fewer choices. There is not as much appetite variety, so to speak, between the appetites of the little kids. So you didn't have all those problems of too much too little food for the youngest ones. And the fact that they just stayed in place and nobody needed to herd them through was actually a good thing. But what we learned early on, and this was these were the first models.
Can I just say that for even all the negative things we've said about classroom delivery, quite a few of our clients have decided to continue doing this for their youngest grades, the littlest kids, the pre-K through first grade. They're going to continue it going into the fall, even with a year behind them.
But for everybody else, we needed to figure out, still using classroom delivery, how to make the process work better.
So taking away choices is not a good thing if you want to keep people happy. So we ended up giving choices back, increasing the menu variety. The original ordering platforms that we used limited people to 4 choices. Now think about it. One of those is a vegetarian choice. So in the eyes of the community, the non-vegetarian members of the community, you've just taken my choices from 4 down to 3 right there. So we had to add choices back and then figure out how the kitchen could produce and deliver without messing up more choices of main items. But the next part, the second middle bullet point, is actually maybe the most important thing. Taking variety away was bad. Giving control back to the students was the solution. So what we did was we focused on having mom or whoever was doing the ordering just order the center of the plate item, whether it was the sandwich or the hot item, but not the sides. And then we would deliver all of those add-ons to the classroom and let the teacher and the kids sort them out so that everybody could have just as much of what they wanted and regain some control over their lunch. And that was like the moral of the story. Our aha moment in the spring was that Control is every bit as important as variety. In fact, even with less variety, if that feeling of control is there, the kids will not be upset with lunch. The last point is actually very funny. One of our schools said to us, you know, moms, when they're ordering, seem to always order salad for their child. And the teachers will let you know that a lot of those salads go straight into the trash, and it's a tremendous waste of food. So what the school decided to do was, instead of having us send the salads to the kids, we delivered the salads family style, the way they would do in a boarding school, and let the teacher serve those kids who wanted salad, and that way cut down on all of the salad that was going uneaten straight into the trash every single day.
So now the teacher, keep in mind, is a server, the wait staff for the students. They're handing out the salads. They're doing a whole lot of dining service work for these students in the classroom. This was not a favorite of just about anybody, but especially not of the teachers.
All right, let's go back to June. In June, we predicted that for the schools that came back with hybrid, for where partial population was on campus, that the cafeteria was going to be the place that you would put everybody through, but it would be a capacity planning exercise. Seating capacity, by definition, with social distancing, was going to get cut in half. There was the only way to stop the kind of cattle car, you know, that the cafeterias used to be pre-COVID, like in this picture that I put up, is if there was a much better coordination between the school, either by the school changing its schedule or releasing the classes one by one so they wouldn't bunch up at the time of serving. It was obvious that everybody was worried about shared surfaces, so self-service went away right away in the spring. And then there was always the option that we might still have to do those cafeteria clones around campus.
So sure enough, what ended up happening is we lost seating capacity, not only because, as you saw, we were using it in order to, whether it's make boxes or just put everything else in little containers, we needed space in which to work. But in addition, we lost seating capacity because many schools took over the dining halls, redivided them, and used them for classroom space or study space, which then took away the places for people to sit. What that meant is that everyone was going through the servery, those 50% who was using the servery in the fall and more now, and taking their meals to sit someplace else. So remember we said challenge assumptions? Well, in this case, you were separating where the food was served from where the children sat. They sat somewhere else, some of them just going back to their classrooms. Well, what that meant is the increased use of disposables, meaning even though they were using the servery, we couldn't just put the food on a plate and let them sit down at the table because there were no tables to sit at. They were walking with the food. It needed to be closed and enclosed. And even when the food was actually served in the servery by someone, it still needed to be placed in something that was disposable because the students were not sitting right there. There was less variety and multiple models being run in parallel by a very stretched staff in general. As they're packaging food, they're putting things in little, to-go containers, they're serving the food directly, and they are, and they're doing all of the above all together. It was better. It was a better, higher quality process, but not ideal. That said, of all of the models we had, it's the students who ate in this particular model that had the highest degree of satisfaction.
Now, back in June, we figured that setting up those satellite serving locations was the answer for schools that were going to try to fit 100% of the students back on campus. This is going to be done by necessity. Well, and we knew that students were going to be in pods or cohorts. What we didn't really appreciate was how strict the firewalls were going to be between those pods and cohorts, such that even if the school was only back 50%, the 6th grade was never going to occupy the same physical space as the 7th grade or the 8th grade. They weren't going to enter on one another's buildings. So even with 50% of the students back, we were going to be doing remote locations. The questions we were asking then was, well, where are they going to be? Are they going to be inside buildings, or are they going to be outdoors like this mobile kitchen here? Where are the kids going to eat, in their classrooms or on other spaces in campus like the Performing Arts building or some other building that COVID rendered unusable, like the gymnasium that we saw in that first picture. Serving food safely, according to the Board of Health, means you have to maintain temperature. Cold foods have to stay cold and hot foods have to stay hot. And that was going to require an investment, because none of us were set up to feed that many people in so many places every single day. If it were catered functions and that only happened once a year, you rent that equipment when you need it. But for every single day, you are going to have to make an investment. The menu to be delivered was never going to be the same menu that we started with. And of course, beverages, oh my gosh, beverages are supposed to be the least expensive part of your meal. But when you have to buy bottled beverages or do that sort of thing, that takes this inexpensive part of your lunch and makes it suddenly much more expensive.
So let's take a look at what these different satellite serving locations could look like and what that word actually meant in reality.
So this is a school outside of Washington, D.C., where the satellite serving was essentially a cold food choice, a choice of sandwiches every day. So it's like going to NBOA or NAIS and they do that free lunch in the exhibit hall where you go down the table and you say, oh yeah, I want a ham sandwich, I want a turkey sandwich. And then the kids would then get their apple or whatever at the end of the serving line. This is a school in New Jersey made the investment in mobile serving equipment, which was of the quality that you could actually use in a cafeteria, to guarantee that for those kids eating in one of their gymnasiums, which were converted for this purpose, that the hot food really was going to be hot. Check out this third choice, because this third choice makes me smile every time I see the picture. This is a school down in Texas. The remote location, the satellite servery, is called a buffet table in a classroom area. You can see the lockers behind the server. And the way the food's being kept hot are on the same chafers that they probably used for catered functions before COVID. The food's beautiful. The kids are going to come through in a line. They're going to get a custom made plate. And yet, we set these up all around campus. That's probably that, and the first one I showed you probably is the two least expensive options for feeding kids day in and day out through the year.
However, the process of doing this, once again, involves having food sit for a long period of time, waiting until it's served, both hot and cold. So if you imagine it's being cooked out of the kitchen, then it's being portioned into containers, whether it's the boxes, whether it is containers from which it's then going to be served, however it's done, transported to this place in more time, held more time until it's time to serve, and then served. So throughout that many hour or at least an hour process from when it's finished cooking to when it arrives and is ready to be served at this satellite place, it's losing temperature. So there are always complaints about the food being too hot or the cold food not being cold enough, although it's more a heat issue. They're not the one in front of this server, because there's a little sternos underneath each of those chafing dishes. So that food happens to be hot, but then the new batch, which is put on top of it, isn't necessarily. The next thing it requires you to be really, really good at is guessing what the kids who arrive at each of these satellite locations are going to want on that particular day. We can be really good at predicting how much food and of which different types of choices the students are going to choose on any given day, and produce to very accurate quantities. But now what we're doing is creating that total quantity of food for the entire campus and then dividing it out among all the satellite stations. And inevitably, you're going to run out of things because kids on that part of the campus or this building want one set of foods, and you have too much of that over here, but these kids wanted something else. So we would end up with people saying they didn't get what they wanted. When plenty was produced, it was in the wrong place. So a lot of our servers' time was spent running between the different satellite stations, trying to replenish things.
We learned how to use radios.
Yeah, they're using walkie-talkies. I mean, this is like back to the future, and just trying to make this all work. Allowing customization was great when kids were able to make choices. A server was able to serve them. That was great. But once again, as you saw before, this is and we'll be back to packaging again, packaging and trash, and then the problem with the beverages still remain, because by definition, every one of these satellite servers are a place where people are going to take the food and walk away. And that food needs to be covered as the kids are walking. And so you're looking at disposables in most cases, and that is a problem. Therefore, the challenge becomes, how do you make this work? How do you manage this satellite serving model, which we feel is necessary in order to safely feed 100% of the campus community when they all return? How do you do it and maintain quality and satisfaction?
And the answer is you might have to just think out of the box. So whoever said that everybody needs to eat the exact same lunch every day? Looking around campus, this was particularly an issue this spring, because across the country, many schools that had been doing the hybrid learning were under tremendous pressure on the 1-year anniversary of COVID to bring everybody back, something they hadn't done. So looking around campus, where else on campus has utilities? Where else has water? Where else has heating and holding equipment? And things like catering kitchens, concession stands, and snack bars stood out. But those places weren't necessarily able to deliver the same menu that the cafeteria could deliver, but some of them could do some other things really well. So if you break the mold that says everybody needs to eat the same type of lunch every day and say, hey, the concession stand is really good at certain items, the snack bar is really good at certain items, well, why don't we call getting to eat lunch at the concession stand or snack bar a treat? And then say on Thursday, the 9th graders are eating at the concession stand and I get to have chicken tenders. Oh my gosh, probably the most popular day of the month. The picture that you're looking at here, it's interesting. This is a school in Florida that has both a mobile food trailer and a tiki hut. This tiki hut's a permanent feature on their campus. And so today at lunch, you can have pizza at the tiki hut and sit outdoors, or you can go to the mobile trailer and get whatever it's serving. It's not going to be the same thing, but it's a way of just doing a different, simpler menu and having it be a big deal. And that's essentially, a way to create satisfaction.
And it maintains your pods or your cohorts, because by restricting the access to only certain student groups, you're able to keep people from crossing paths that shouldn't. And then by rotating, you're able to manage
fairness.
Fair access to this special, amenity.
Anybody with kids knows how important fairness is.
Yeah. So, but once again, what we're still dealing with is those pesky disposables and the landfill mess that we're creating in perpetuity.
When COVID started, we keep ragging on the consultants, but it really was as if there were people saying you can't do food. If you do food, it's got to be in boxes. You should probably just be buying it. And the reality was, and it took months to convince many of our clients that, the dish machine sanitizes really well. There are no viruses or bacteria on the stuff that comes out from your dish room. We should use that. We should use that facility there. We're using it anyway, probably for the stuff we use in the kitchen. Why not serve on that on as much as possible? Things that we put through the dish machine.
Remember, the dish machine uses both chemicals and in soap and methods to get that clean, the food off the plates, and it's also using high heat. So those dishes are totally safe through the dish machine. And it's also possible to run reusable containers through the dish machine.
Yeah, we showed these in June. These are called OZI containers. They're used them on college campuses for takeout, but we're using these all across the country at the schools, and they cost about $5 a piece, but they're good for hundreds of uses. So it's an investment. The picture is a fascinating picture from a school in Rhode Island. This must have been the 119th day of service, because they have these stickers on there that say how this one OZI container saved 119 containers from the landfill. That plays really well with your student audience.
So this container, if you think about it, remember some of the pictures we showed you where a server is behind a serving line and serving students. Well, all right, so they're not serving it on regular plates, but they can serve that beautiful food right into this type of container, and it's not going in the landfill. It's just coming right back to the dish machine. It can be used all year, and we believe multiple years use out of a single container.
But if you're going to do it, you've got to have a system for collecting them and then washing them and then setting them out to dry so they can be used again the next day.
And that's not a minor issue, because these containers, if you are considering them, take an awful lot of space to dry. Unlike plates, which are stackable and can just drip dry quickly, these things need to be set out, separated pretty much overnight to dry. So you're not getting multiple uses in a day. You'll get uses over time, but not in a single day. You need one per member of your community, plus some extras, and then a process in the evening where they're spread all over the dining hall, probably, in order to just dry. I mean,
That's why we lost the dining hall.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. And then these collection stations that you set up need to be convenient to the students so that you're getting all of your materials back. They're worth a lot of money, but people do use them. It works. The next big idea is hydration stations. So a huge source of trash on campuses is bottles from water, from juices, from all the different things that are placed in bottles and then placed in the trash. So getting rid of the bottles is key. Hydration stations are, many of you are probably familiar with this, but they're like towers with many nodes where students can come and fill up their water bottles. So it works best when students bring their water bottles from home, so they're all unique and they look different, unlike when schools would give the same bottle to all students because it's a school branded bottle, and then nobody knew whose was whose because they were all looking alike. But when they bring their own bottle and they keep it with them all day and then have convenient hydration stations in which to refill it all day, it takes you out of the business of providing beverages, having bottles. It really does save a tremendous amount on the waste heap that arrives at the end of the day.
This next bullet point was definitely not our idea. We were on a call with one of our schools, and they said, well, the fifth graders got sick and tired of seeing all of these throwaway cutlery packets in their delivered lunches every day. So they all decided as a grade to bring their cutlery from home, use it, and then take it home for mom to wash. And once the fifth grade got the hang of that, they challenged the sixth grade. And it was a cute story, but then we started hearing about other schools doing the same thing. I think, the moral of the story is kids hate this waste and the trash spectacle. They really do care about the planet. That's what we've been teaching them. Then some of the simplest solutions don't come from the grown-ups.
Compostables are often seen as a good strategy for reducing, trash, because they're going to just be composted and turned, right back into usable materials. First of all, they're about triple the cost of regular paper that you could serve on. And secondly, in order for this to really work, it means that there has to be a separate company, separate waste receptacles, separate pickup, in order to make sure that the compostables actually go to a compost facility and are composted.
Otherwise, they just become landfill.
Yeah, and if they just go in the landfill, then you've just paid triple for something that is not doing the planet any good. What we have encouraged all of our clients to do is to look for the small victories. Everything doesn't need to happen on a campus-wide basis. Every little step helps. And instead of claiming that, it's not a victory because we didn't get 100%, let's start claiming the little victories. So for example, if we can use reusable containers or your traditional plates for the students that go to the servery, then great, that's maybe 25%, maybe 50%. And that's a reduction. If the kids will bring their cutlery from home and it's only a few grades, that's great. That's a few grades that managed to do it.
Or if we use the cutlery from the kitchen, but set up collection stations and bring it back. We've recommended that through the year. Just chip away at the mountain with each little victory.
And measure it and report on it and feel good about it, because this is all progress. And talk about little victories. We're getting one back.
Yeah, you're starting to see this around the country. Who knows? It may take a while to get to California. It may not, but self-service is coming back. This was originally the slide from last June that said self-service is going away. So I just changed the tagline. But what you see in the picture is a disposable glove of the kind that you might have used in the supermarket in the bakery section to reach in and get yourself, rolls or bagels. And states are allowing these to be used and reopening deli and salad bar soup stations and all those places where surfaces were shared in the past.
Now,
but
this may sound like a really cool thing. Ooh, let's go to the salad bar. The problem is that the COVID restrictions are still with us. So people have to stay 6 feet apart. And in the areas where this is now permitted, we still have to maintain the single directional flow. So this is salad bars, not where kids swarm the salad bar and go get whatever they want and then move on. And it's, it's just very, very crowded. This is a one-way, 6 feet between students. They're sanitizing their hands, putting on this thing, the gloves, choosing, taking the glove off, putting it in the trash, using sanitizer again. Okay, next. So this process is time consuming. Can it be done? Yes, but is it likely to allow us to feed hundreds of kids using a salad bar simultaneously? No. So once again, let's look at little wins and consider how this could potentially work when it's available in your schools. For example, allowing a salad bar for faculty use, or just allowing certain grades, certain days to be able to enjoy the salad bar as another one of those privileges. And we're looking at different ways to bring back this feature, but do it in a way that is still COVID safe. So one more time, we're going to take a look at what we said in June.
Yeah. So in June, then we turned sort of towards the back half of the presentation. We looked at retail cafeterias, and of course, retail is a big percentage of private school food service. And what we focused on in this slide back then was really the physical barriers, creating a sort of a safe environment for the transfer of value, putting a shield at that barrier between the cashier and the student, getting rid of currency, only using a charge system, but getting rid of pin pads and anything that was going to be a shared service, using barcodes more than before. But the last bullet point might very well have been the most important one, and we didn't dwell on it. Breaking even. Economics was every bit, if not more important than the other stuff in retrospect. This year, just about every single retail cafeteria that you can look at lost money. And some of it lost a lot of money. And then there's a lot of very obvious reasons for it. If half your student population is staying home, that means your sales just got cut in half, but your break even didn't. If there are frequent quarantines of whether they're athletic teams or grades, or maybe the school is extending spring break because people traveled, so they want them to essentially quarantine at home for a week or two before coming back, you're just cutting the customer base for the cafeteria. We had schools that said, after Thanksgiving break, nobody's coming back until January. So they combined, they did distance learning for the month of December. Well, that killed the cafeteria. And then even if everybody's back on campus, with social distancing, schools limited access. There were no more impulse purchases, people coming in for snacks, people coming in for breakfast, people going back for seconds at lunchtime. All of those things that help to make the sales targets for the retail cafeteria, those levers were all taken away. So just like in the rest of the world, you end up having to cut variety to make things work, and then you're stuck serving things which at higher cost, like those bottled beverages and all. So you've limited the population base, that lowers the sales numbers and increased the cost of service. Including like, if you think about it, like this particular picture might have been taken during COVID, but those at least are not takeout containers. You take those inexpensive little paper boats and you change them over to those domed containers, and you've just taken the paper cost for that transaction and tripled it for no good reason. It's all going to go in the trash.
And then think, it's packaged dressing, it's PCs of ketchup and mustard instead of the pumps. The marginal cost on each of those things is very significant. So it really cuts into.
There's a ketchup shortage.
Yes, I know. So it really cuts into your profitability.
So if in the future, unless things get better, you're facing the prospect of having your retail food operation lose money. We were having a discussion, it was really interesting, with a CFO at a school we were heading towards losing six figures. And she said, I am not going to endanger $13 million worth of revenue because I might lose $100,000 in the cafeteria. These families want lunch. So,
but that said, remember we showed you a chart that showed that 93% of the schools we serve returned. The vast majority of the 7% who chose not to open dining service this year were retail.
Think about it here, 501c3, do you want to volunteer to lose six figures? Yeah, because that's the kind of losses that people were facing this year. So if you're running then a manual food service operation, retail, and you don't want to lose money, you have to make decisions like downsizing the staff, because your staff is essentially your fixed cost. And as you do that, you start to sort of change the nature of the operation. So I want to explain the photograph, and then we'll talk about the bullet points. This photograph is the cafeteria at a place that we serve in Houston. That's a college. And they had the bad fortune to have a tornado tear up the building where the cafeteria was. And then COVID comes. So now, even if you do reopen, there are only going to be half as many students. Well, we're running the cafeteria out of a tent. We're cooking out of a trailer. The staff is much smaller. So it's all these things we were talking about. We've brought in more convenience items because the smaller staff can only do so much. And it changes sort of the feel of the place to be a little more like a convenience store that has prepared foods. And that the P&L statement ends up looking different because cafeterias are more like restaurants with a lower food cost, and convenience stores are more like supermarkets with the products or much lower margin, but you make it up in volume. Well, this place between the different things that we've done, and then the fact that the school put $300 on each kid's account. Now,
Well, they didn't put it there.
they charge the families $300 per semester to generate usage and pay for this amenity. And the end of the day, the story is a really good story. This place isn't losing money. It's actually doing more in daily sales than they did before the tornado. And it's going to be a very good story. The next thing that they're looking at is pre-ordering. And now pre-ordering, is all the restaurants in the country are doing this. But if you've got a tiny facility with a limited staff, how do you increase sales further? Well, maybe you don't force everybody to come at the same time, and you let them place their orders and then come pick them up.
So back on that facilities fee, what Paco just described is a school that essentially put $300 a semester, could be $100 a semester, whatever, of food purchasing power on each student's card and in each student's bill. And that's when it's done by, in terms of food, but it could also just be a fee anyway, a number, an amount that's contribution toward the overhead of maintaining this choice. So the choice itself is of economic value, but many schools don't ask those who choose not to participate on any given day to contribute toward the cost of providing the choice. And maybe this is something that should be considered now. This is, once again, challenge all assumptions. You want to offer this amenity, this opportunity for students to be able to dine on campus, and it somehow needs to be funded in this new world model. So perhaps that fee is the way to do it.
I think those 7% of schools who opted not to do food service really sort of diminished what they were offering to those families. So yes, the kids are still eating, but the proposition, the package of what the school was offering is less than it used to be.
The future that we all face collectively, though, has a very big warning sign on it, and that is the labor force. There was a week ago an article in, I believe, the Wall Street Journal also, which talked about the fact that there are 8.4 million fewer workers in the United States now than there were prior. And there's an article in that same paper today that talks about how hard restaurants, fast food restaurants, sit-down restaurants, high-end restaurants, everyone, how hard a time they're having finding labor. And it's causing people not to open as many venues, et cetera, et cetera. This is no joke. We're facing this all over the country and in California as well. As you're looking to reopen your dining halls, reopen your schools, please realize there are just fewer people out there, period. And they're worried some of it is permanent.
We can honestly say that, and for the hundreds of kitchens that we run across the country, precious few, maybe, you can count them on one or two hands, are fully staffed today, and everybody is short of labor.
Unfortunately, the dining service of a school, of any school, is not really an employer that's in high regard, because our schedules are so sporadic. And the way that employment in our schools all across the country has been looked at is something that is a variable cost. School is closed for a week, lay them off for a week, or furlough them for a week. School's closed for the summer, goodbye everybody, see you in the fall. And we just expect people will be back. As COVID has caused longer and longer periods of forced unemployment, well, people have had less and less work. And so they've many times gone elsewhere, found other opportunities. And that means that they're not there when we come back and want to hire them. So, what do you do about that? Well, for one thing, we have to do everything we collectively can to make sure that our jobs, the jobs of dining service workers in schools, are as good and stable as they can be. That the wages are good wages that they'll come back for, benefits, et cetera. And when school does have to close, whether for a summer or extended winter break or whatever those reasons are, that we work together to find alternate employment for those individuals, doing other things on campus, but potentially working in maintenance. We had some schools asking our team members to help paint over the summer, or drive a bus or check kids in to school, or maybe supervise the playground so teachers had some time off. Anything at all to keep them employed so they keep coming back and you're able to provide a steady a paycheck as you can to them will help you. And by the way, even as you are looking at all of this, even your suppliers, those people who will be providing you with anything that you need for your dining service, they're facing these same problems
So
too.
if you think about it, the folks who sell food to us are the same people who sell food to restaurants and hotels. When that world shut down, they laid everybody off. And then as the world has started to reopen, they've had a very hard time filling those slots. We have inexperienced truck drivers coming in and running things over on campuses. It seems like every week. The people in the warehouse who are picking the orders keep sending us the wrong stuff or missing things on our orders. It's really kind of a slow motion mess. I want to talk about this picture though for a second. This is the staff at that boarding school that I showed you right at the beginning. It doesn't take a lot of people to feed that population every day, but they're down 3 positions. There are 2 real vacancies, and then there was 1 person who's out ill, and I don't know how long they've been out for. And yet I had the head of school take me aside during lunch the day that I was there, and he said, I got to tell you, this is like the best year for food ever. And I think, I'm like, what, are you crazy? And he said, no, you're doing way fewer things, but they're done better. And it was like, oh my gosh, there's a truth there, which is if you have fewer people, you can't do as much. So what you do better be perfect. It better be the best you can do. And apparently at this particular school, they managed to do that, which was good because I was really afraid of what he was going to say to me when he pulled me aside.
So in summary, we've been talking to you a long time. We just wanted to throw out the big picture summary of the points that we want to leave you with as you look to reopen your dining halls in the fall. First of all, as we've said over and over and over again, getting kids back through the servery, feeding them there is most efficient, has the highest quality food, has the highest level of satisfaction. It is the way to go if you can possibly do it. And the corollary to that is classroom delivery, except for the youngest students, is really not the ideal. It is a tremendous amount of work, tremendous amount of trash, and nobody's happy. It's pretty frustrating. Customization is what drives happiness. And the more we can let customers choose, however you can manage it, the better off we'll be.
I mean, we've been doing this for 30 years, and for 30 years, we've been repeating the word variety. That's the secret to everything. That's what a successful food service operation is all about. And it turned out it wasn't really so much variety as it was control, allowing the child to have control over what goes on their plate.
Labor, there's not a lot of it out there. And if you spend those labor hours packaging, there are going to be fewer labor hours to interact with your students and cook the great food that people really are looking for. So we really have to be careful how we use the labor resources that we do have. Reusable containers will pay for themselves and the environment will thank you afterwards. And so this photo here that you see is on the right is a server who is serving a student a food in a traditional plate. It just is so much more welcoming, appealing than food served in something, in a clamshell. So wherever you can, use reusables, use your regular plates in China, and reimagine everything. Reimagine space, reimagine method, reimagining how you do everything, because there are no rules and we shouldn't be limiting ourselves. There's schools that are serving all day instead of treating what we do as lunch at noon and serving everyone in 20 minutes. We're starting at 10 in the morning and finishing at 3, and people are eating all during the day because
It's the only way to maintain social
That's how to
distancing
do it.
where the facilities can't be expanded.
So challenge every assumption and free yourself from some of the unnecessary limitations that we've all placed on this collective good that we call nourishment in a school. And finally,
it's just the fact of life that population numbers drive the economics for retail cafeterias. So now we can sit here and tell you, don't do retail food service, do some other model. But since it is the prevalent model, then we've got to start doing math and figuring out the impact of all of these decisions on the dining service, on the cafeteria.
So thank you for letting us spend this morning hour with you, and we still have about 5 minutes left.
Oh my God, you think we rehearsed?
So we would love to answer any questions that you may have.
So we don't have too large of a group. So if you would like to unmute yourself, please feel free to do so. We'd love this to be interactive. We'd love to see your face if you're comfortable. So we'll open up the floor. Any questions? And just to let you know, we are recording all of the sessions and we're going to have copies of the decks. Once I have collected all of those materials, I'll put it on the website and I'll send out an email so everyone will have access to those goodies.
And you saw, Andrea, we have not changed the presentation since Friday.
I'm proud. I'm so proud. Yeah. Yeah, I understand. And I love visuals. I think they, you know, they tell the story very, very quickly. So, and they're just pretty to look at, which is nice. All right. Well,
Andrea?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I had a quick question if we have time.
Absolutely.
Hi, Paco and Tina. This
Hi.
is Margaret Randazzo from Hillbrook. Nice to see you. Thanks for the presentation. It was great. Do you think we'll ever, we're a school of about 350 and then we have about 80 employees. Do you think employees can get back to going to a room and buffet serving, maybe using that big glove, or do you think a servery is going to be the best model, like having a cafeteria staff serve that food?
You know, you're talking about for your staff, for your 80 staff to be able to go and
For
essentially
the 80
enjoy.
staff. Definitely we'll do it for the kids. We've been doing the pre-order. We're one of the schools that are losing. We're not in the 6 figures, but we're in the 5 figures loss
Just as
this year.
painful.
We're hoping to let the kids go through the servery, but what I'm asking about more is for the employees.
Yeah, so first of all, every one of these decisions is based on what your local Board of Health allows. And county by county, they can be really jerky or they can be really permissive. But in theory, if you've got those disposable gloves and hand sanitizer, and if everybody's masked, then you've got, you know, it's a safe practice to pick up your lunch that way. Some of these states require an attendant, though, to be there, to be essentially the COVID policeman, making sure that the social distancing is happening, that the surfaces are being sanitized, right? Tina's big on the rules.
Yeah, it is social distancing, but you know, it's every little bit helps, every little choice, opportunity. So it's going to really depend on how much this is desired by your community, where that is and how logical it is that only they have access and not the kids, and if that's going to cause a problem. You know, is it separate, is it together, who's manning it? You know, so it's just a lot of specifics, but if I would go for it.
Yeah. And I like the idea of all the different locations and serving different things. Our issue is just the POS, like how do you then charge the student? You know, if it's all in the cafeteria, they're picking up their snack, or if they're picking up a juice or, you know, whatever. We've only got 3 people. So, I mean, we're pretty small, but that's the only challenge, but I love that offering. I think it'd be awesome.
But, you know, in the past, before COVID, when we would take a look at the economics of a school with, say, multiple kitchens and multiple cashiers in multiple places,
Yeah.
That was like saying, because this school is 1,000 kids. No, this is 2 schools with 500 kids. And so the economics are those two added together. They're not the economies of scale that you get. So when you start moving the point of sale to multiple venues on campus, you've started like increasing the fixed costs of each of those sub places.
Except there is another option that more and more people are starting to look at, comes from the college world. So imagine self-scanning POS. So there's no attendant. Someone just grabs whatever they want. It's a closed community. They scan it themselves. There's a camera there to check just in case you're not honest. And that's that, and that's how it's done.
Like a card or like a thumbprint?
Well, whatever, it's going to be barcode. It would read the barcode and read your ID. So however you have it,
Cool.
whether it's a thumbprint, whether it's your existing.
We've actually done that at 2 separate
Right.
places now.
Yeah.
Three separate
Cool.
places.
Yeah, very cool.
Thank you.
So Andrea, we're
Andrea.
very cognizant of time.
We are right on the nose. I am so impressed. We're trying very hard to keep the whole session on time. So if there are no further questions, we'll have a little 15-minute break, and then we're right back at it at 10:45. So with that, I would like to thank Paco and Tina so much for their fantastic presentation. And we'll see everyone in about 15 minutes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.